Hello internet users and welcome back to another video. Something that I will always remember fondly is the days of Flash games in the mid-2000s. While a lot of them were pretty amateur and not very impressive by today's standards, back then there was something really unique about them that you just couldn't find anywhere else. This was especially the case with the ones that were fan games. Want to see Mario battle against the Grim Reaper? Flash games. Want to see Sonic in a dramatic over-the-top RPG battle? Flash games. Want to see Link with Super Saiyan hair, Cloud Strife sword, and wearing a Green Lantern outfit? Flash games. For myself and a lot of others, these absurd Flash games were my entry point for the weird world of fan projects. And for this video, I'm going to be focusing on one in particular. It's one of the first that I ever played, and was released all the way back in 2006. Of course, I can only be talking about a Koopas Revenge. This is a fan game that got a lot of attention when it came out. Up until then, most Flash games you'd see were pretty short, and you'd likely be done with them in a couple of minutes. But this one was a full game, featuring several stages, power-ups, and even a variety of boss fights. Projects like these were very uncommon back then, and when I was young, I remember being blown away when I first discovered this. I played a Koopas Revenge a lot, but was never able to finish it, so today I'm going to be revisiting the game and seeing just how it holds up today. The story to the game is pretty simple. While at a party, Koopa steps out to use the restroom, but while he's gone, Mario and friends show up and attack all of his Goomba buddies. Koopa then sets out on a quest to have his revenge. The game is a 2D platformer where you need to reach the goal at the end of each stage. Unsurprisingly, the gameplay tries to be very similar to a standard Mario game. There are 5 worlds with 3 stages in each one, and at the end of a world you have to fight a boss. You're not given any more story aside from that initial cutscene, but Koopa begins his adventure at Bowser's castle. One of the first things you're probably going to notice is that the regular enemies are Toads and Yoshis. Since you're playing as a normal Mario enemy, it only makes sense that your obstacles here are the characters that are normally friendly with Mario. As you might expect, Koopa defeats enemies by jumping on them. When you do this, they leave a little red puddle behind. Like I said, this was the mid-2000s. Back then, everyone thought it was pretty hilarious to add crude things like this to their fan games, especially in the case where cute Nintendo characters were involved. The first time that I saw this sort of thing in fan games, I think I was even a little disturbed by it, but it's pretty silly to think about now. Toads and Yoshis are supposed to be friends. I guess when I was younger, my innocent mind just couldn't handle seeing this, since it was something that would never be seen in an official game. Anyways, moving on, something else that I'm sure you can tell is that the gameplay of a Koopa's Revenge is a bit clunky. An issue that just about every Mario fan game has is that they never feel exactly like Mario, no matter how hard they try. In this game, the movement and jumping is about as basic as you can get for a platformer, with some quirks here and there. It works well enough for the most part, but there are a lot of times where doing simple things like hitting blocks looks and feels kind of glitchy. A good example is with the collision. If you keep walking into a wall, Koopa will always go into it a little, and then get pushed out when you stop moving. Jumping can also sometimes be awkward, since if you're still holding the button, he will immediately jump again as soon as he touches the ground. As you can imagine, these two issues can make it especially awkward when you're trying to jump onto a higher platform. There also isn't much weight to Koopa, so his movement in the air can sometimes feel jarring when falling from a great height or bouncing off of an enemy. If you were to sit down with this game for a while, you can definitely feel how rough it is in a lot of places. That being said, despite how I'm making it sound, I still found it to be decently enjoyable for what it is. When I was revisiting this for a video, I was genuinely surprised at how playable it still was. It seems like the creator was aware of the gameplay limitations and kept the levels mostly designed in a way where the mechanics don't lead to too many unfair deaths. When it comes to old Flash games, not many people go back to play them unless they have some nostalgia for them. And while I do think that mostly applies to this game as well, there is definitely some charm still here that I think some people will see, even if they were to play it for the first time today. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that yes, the game definitely hasn't aged well, but I think it still functions alright for what it is and when it came out. But with all of that in mind, there is still quite a bit of content I want to talk about in this game. Throughout his adventure, Koopa will have access to a couple of power-ups. Grabbing a fire flower will give him a red shell and let him breathe fire. In the later worlds, you can use the fire to melt ice blocks, which can unlock shortcuts and make certain platforming sections a bit easier. If you get a feather, he'll grow wings and will be able to jump higher and slowly descend when falling. If you take a hit, Koopa will lose his power-up and return to his green shell. If you take another hit while like this, he'll lose his shell altogether. Taking damage one more time will cause you to lose a life. If you run out of lives, you'll be given a game over, and then return to the title screen. Luckily, this game has a save feature that can be used on the world map at any time, so make sure you use it often. Every stage also has a midway checkpoint you'll return to when you lose a life. In the case of a world's final level, a checkpoint will always be placed outside of the boss door. Which brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, the bosses. As expected, every boss is one of Mario's friends, and they're damaged by jumping on their heads. Like the rest of the game, the fights can feel a bit clunky to do, but to give credit, I can appreciate some of the creative ideas that went into them. In Bowser's Castle, Wario will loop around the arena and then head inside of a machine to launch fireballs at you. In the forest, Peach will fly back and forth, tossing things at you from above. You have to wait for the flowers to open and time your jumps, so you'll have enough height to reach her. At the end of the mountains, you'll face Waluigi, who has a pretty unique battle. He's on a machine digging further into the cave, while it also collapses behind you. You need to avoid both the exhaust and falling icicles until you're able to make the jump to attack him. This part was as far as I ever got when I was younger. It's not so bad once you get used to it, but when visiting the game again for this video, this is where I started to have a lot of trouble. The boss after this is Luigi, and he's kind of a joke, to be honest. He just moves left and right, and you hit him. There isn't much to it. Overall, I think that there is a decent balance of difficulty to most of these levels. Once I got to the desert world, though, I found that there were a handful of challenging sections. There are a lot of spiky floors and ceilings, and the timing on some jumps can be really strict. It's so easy to slip up, and can be really frustrating when you accidentally graze one of the spikes. But once through here, the game changes everything up for the final world. In Mario's Castle, you're in for some really long and brutal levels. No joke, half the time I spent playing this game was just on this world alone. It's incredibly unforgiving, and it took me forever just to reach the first checkpoint. Not only that, but in Stage 2, they added a boss rush. That's right, you have to refight the 4 previous bosses, all in a row, and this time they're much harder. For example, Wario has lava rise in his arena. It doesn't even affect him, it's just there to make you miserable. Peach has a fireball endlessly moving back and forth during her fight, while Luigi has fire bars attached to his wheels, and Luigi is actually pretty much the same, and I beat him with no trouble. Really seems like the creator of this didn't care much for Luigi. The boss rush was really overwhelming at first, but I eventually managed to get through it. In the Peach refight, I found that if you sit in the corner, nothing will ever be able to hit you, so you can trivialize this fight as long as you stay patient and wait for an opening. Wario's fight is also really consistent, so once you know where to stand during his attacks, there isn't much to it at all. Once you're at the end of the castle, it'll finally be time to battle against Mario, and for some reason, he's controlling a giant mech of himself. For the first phase, you have to jump onto the top of its hands when they're vulnerable. The second phase, though, is where things get kind of unfair. He will randomly throw out a few different attacks in no particular order. You have to be ready to dodge any one of them at a moment's notice. The first problem I have here is with the bomb attack. It seemed way too difficult to avoid, and I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. This was the case until I happened to see something. Whenever Mario does this attack, a small platform appears on the left side of the arena. What you're supposed to do is jump on there for a few seconds to wait it out. There isn't any indication that it appears and disappears, so the fight is just trial and error until you notice it. What makes this even worse is the fact that his spike attack always comes from the left side of the screen, so naturally, I was always hanging around the right side to be prepared to jump over it. Another problem with this phase is that it's also not even clear when you're doing damage. For one of his attacks, he'll send his body rolling across the screen. You're supposed to jump on this to hurt him, but there isn't any feedback that you're doing anything, so you wouldn't even know. The entire time, I was expecting his head to eventually lower for me to jump on or something. It wasn't until he was defeated that I realized I was damaging him by bouncing over this one attack. Once that is done, Koopa saves another Goomba, and the credits roll. Not really much in the way of an ending, but you're left with a little message saying that Bowser is nowhere to be found. We're not quite done yet, though. In a Koopa's Revenge, there is something else that I need to talk about. The secret level. This is something that can only be accessed if you play the game on the creator's website. In the second level of World 4, if you go left at the start, you can find an alternate entrance. In this room, if you jump from here with the wing power-up, you'll just be able to reach a hidden platform far off in the left. Inside is a door that will take you to a warp pipe. This pipe will take you into the secret level. And let me just say, this place makes Mario's castle look like a tutorial. The level literally starts by telling you that there are invisible doors hidden everywhere. The platforming you need to do here is ridiculous. Oftentimes you're required to be so precise that you'll end up losing a lot of lives from the game's clunkiness alone. I tried for a while to beat it, but I eventually gave up. It quickly becomes so insufferable that it's not even fun. Like, look at this section here. This is just a small portion of the level too. As soon as you figure out one brutal part, it throws another right at you. And as if that wasn't enough, whenever you lose a life here, the option to return to the world map is replaced with a message that says, "There is no escape." I just couldn't get through this, and I'm okay with saying that. If you're curious, at the end of this, there is apparently a harder version of the final boss fight that you have to clear. And that is it for a Koopa's Revenge, but there is still a few other things that I need to mention. I'm sure that there's already been a bunch of people saying it in the comments before finishing the video, but there is actually a sequel to this game. 8 years after the original, a Koopa's Revenge 2 was released. Taking a brief look at it, it seems like a big step forward in terms of the visuals and gameplay. It apparently even features 3 playable characters this time. But this game is a whole other topic for a whole other video. And finally, let me tell you all something that you might not be aware of. Currently, the creator is working on a remake of the first game. I actually had no idea this was a thing until I already had most of this video written. There is a playable demo for it right now, and it really shows promise so far. It plays a lot better, fixing most of the weird stuff with the jumping, collision, and movement. It's really cool to see such an old game getting remade like this, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. Overall, I think A Koopa's Revenge is a fun little nostalgia trip. There are a lot of problems with its gameplay, but there is no denying the amount of effort that went into its creation. I wouldn't blame anyone for not wanting to go back and play it, but I think that it's an important project that's still worth talking about and remembering. My name is Pikasprey, and thanks for watching.